What if mental decline in later life isn't actually about aging, but about how the brain is trained, challenged, and emotionally managed over time? That's the uncomfortable but empowering truth most people overlook. We tend to obsess over physical health, yet the real driver of independence after 60 is mental strength. The ability to regulate thoughts, manage emotions, and act with clarity under pressure. These are not abstract traits. They are trainable systems. In this video, you'll learn 8 practical ways to keep your mind sharp and emotionally stable as you age. These strategies are grounded in psychology, neuroscience, and real-world behavioral science. The goal is simple: help you maintain cognitive agility, emotional balance, and resilience so your later years feel stable, purposeful, and mentally active rather than slow or foggy. Let's break it down. 1. Train your brain like a mental strength system. The first shift is understanding that mental strength is not personality, it's training. Psychotherapist Amy Morin's research on mentally strong individuals shows a consistent pattern. They don't avoid difficult thoughts or emotions. They manage them with structure. Mental strength is built through 3 daily disciplines: controlling thought patterns, regulating emotional responses, and maintaining productive behavior even under stress. In practical terms, this means stopping automatic mental reactions from running your life. When something goes wrong, the default mind tends to catastrophize or overgeneralize. Mentally strong individuals interrupt this pattern by questioning the interpretation itself. Instead of "this is a disaster," the shift becomes "what exactly is happening? And what is controllable here?" What matters here is not positive thinking, but accurate thinking. The brain under stress is biased toward exaggeration because it is trying to predict threat. If you don't consciously intervene, that bias becomes your reality. Mentally strong individuals train themselves to slow down the interpretation process. They separate facts from assumptions. A delayed response, even by a few seconds, reduces emotional intensity significantly because it gives the prefrontal cortex time to re-engage. Over time, this reduces emotional reactivity and strengthens cognitive stability. The brain becomes less of a reactive system and more of a controlled decision-making engine. This is the foundation for all other forms of mental resilience. There is also a neurological shift that happens with repetition. Each time you interrupt an automatic negative loop, you weaken its neural pathway slightly. Each time you replace it with structured questioning, you strengthen executive control circuits in the brain. This is essentially neuroplasticity in action. You are literally reshaping how your mind responds to stress. Another often ignored factor is self-talk tone. Mentally strong individuals do not speak to themselves in absolute or catastrophic language. They avoid internal phrases like "I always fail" or "nothing works out for me." Instead, they use specific, situation-based language. This reduces emotional overload and prevents identity fusion with temporary problems. The result of this training is not emotional suppression, but emotional clarity. You still experience stress, frustration, and uncertainty, but these states no longer hijack your decision-making process. You begin to observe them as signals rather than commands. That shift alone dramatically improves resilience, especially in later life, when external stability may decrease, but internal stability becomes essential. 2. Stop treating emotions as problems to eliminate. A major misconception about emotional strength is that it means staying calm all the time. That's not strength, it's suppression. Real emotional resilience is the ability to experience intense emotions without being controlled by them. Spiritual teachers like Sadhguru emphasize that emotions are natural energy patterns, not enemies. The problem begins when identification takes over, when "I feel anger" becomes "I am anger." That shift traps the mind inside the emotion rather than observing it. A practical method is to introduce a delay between feeling and reacting. When frustration, sadness, or anxiety appears, the goal is not to suppress it or act immediately, but to observe it without judgment. This simple gap changes everything. It allows the nervous system to settle before decisions are made, preventing emotional spillover into behavior. With repetition, this creates emotional distance without emotional numbness. You don't lose feeling, you gain control over it. 3. Keep cognitive pressure alive to prevent mental stagnation. One of the strongest predictors of cognitive decline is not age, but lack of mental complexity. The brain adapts to the level of challenge it receives. When life becomes overly repetitive, it reduces neural demand, and cognitive pathways gradually weaken. This is why mental sharpness is closely tied to novelty and problem solving. The brain thrives when it is forced to adapt to new patterns, even small ones. Learning unfamiliar skills, switching routines, or engaging in unfamiliar perspectives forces deeper cognitive engagement. Even something as simple as intentionally exposing yourself to ideas you disagree with can strengthen reasoning circuits. The brain is not built to remain static. It is built to update. Without updates, it defaults to efficiency. And efficiency in aging often means cognitive narrowing. 4. Rebuild identity beyond work and roles. A major psychological shift after retirement is identity loss. For decades, identity is often anchored to occupation, responsibility, and external validation. When those disappear, the mind can experience subtle instability, not because life is empty, but because structure has been removed. To stay mentally strong, identity must shift from external roles to internal frameworks. Instead of what I do, the focus becomes how I think, contribute, and grow. This creates continuity even when external circumstances change. Without this shift, the mind often falls into repetitive loops of past identity or future uncertainty. With it, attention moves forward into active engagement. This is one of the most overlooked drivers of emotional stability in aging. 5. Train attention to stabilize thought and emotion. Attention is not just focus. It is emotional regulation infrastructure. When attention is fragmented, thoughts become scattered, and emotions become harder to control. Modern life constantly trains distraction, which weakens mental clarity over time. Rebuilding attention does not require extreme discipline. It requires reducing unnecessary multitasking and practicing sustained awareness in simple tasks. Reading without interruption, walking without devices, or engaging in hands-on activities without background stimulation all strengthen attentional control. This matters because emotional instability often emerges when attention is weak. The mind drifts into rumination more easily, and small triggers become emotionally amplified. Strong attention creates psychological stability by reducing mental noise. 6. Strengthen the brain through physical regulation. Mental performance is not isolated from the body. Cognitive function is deeply tied to circulation, oxygen delivery, and neurochemical balance. When physical activity decreases, the brain receives less stimulation, which can manifest as mental fatigue, irritability, or slower thinking. Movement is not just exercise, it is brain activation. Even moderate physical activity increases the release of neurotrophic factors that support learning and memory. This is why mentally strong individuals rarely separate physical and mental health. They function as a single system. In aging, this connection becomes even more important. A sedentary body often produces a sluggish mind, while an active body supports cognitive flexibility and emotional balance. 7. Build emotional strength through real social interaction. Social connection is often discussed as quantity, but mental strength depends more on quality. Passive interaction is not enough to maintain cognitive and emotional health. The brain needs meaningful engagement, conversation, shared problem solving, and emotional exchange. When social interaction becomes shallow or repetitive, cognitive stimulation decreases. But when it involves curiosity, disagreement, storytelling, or shared learning, multiple brain regions activate simultaneously. This kind of engagement strengthens empathy, reasoning, and emotional regulation. It also reduces the risk of cognitive isolation, which is one of the hidden accelerators of mental decline. 8. Protect mental energy by managing attention inputs. Modern environments overload the brain with constant stimulation, news, notifications, entertainment, and fragmented content. Over time, this creates cognitive fatigue and emotional instability, even if the content feels harmless. Mentally strong individuals actively control what enters their attention field. This is not about isolation, but about reducing unnecessary mental load. The brain requires recovery time, just like the body. When attention is constantly hijacked, emotional regulation weakens. When attention is protected, the mind regains clarity, patience, and stability. This becomes increasingly important with age, when cognitive recovery naturally slows down. Mental sharpness and emotional strength are not preserved by chance. They're maintained through deliberate cognitive and emotional training. Aging does not automatically reduce mental capacity. Neglect does. The brain responds to how it is used, not how old it is. The real advantage later in life comes from consistency, regulating emotions instead of reacting impulsively, challenging thought patterns instead of repeating them, and maintaining cognitive engagement instead of defaulting to routine. There you have it. 8 practical ways to stay mentally sharp and emotionally strong as you age. Whether it's training emotional regulation, strengthening attention, or keeping your brain challenged through complexity, each approach helps protect cognitive health and emotional stability over time. The key is not intensity, it's consistency. If this helped clarify how mental strength actually works in later life, apply at least one of these principles consistently rather than trying to do everything at once. That's where real change happens.